In an age of reimaginations and recreations of some of the classic synths of the 70s and 80s, we have a contender for the heir apparent to the PPG wave. Let's talk about it. Hi, I'm Zach Marr from Alamo Music here in San Antonio, Texas. You can find us online at alamomusic.com. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, turn on your notifications. This is our Alamo Sound Lab channel where we talk about all things music tech related. And today we're looking at the Waldorf M. And I've been really excited to get my hands on one of these when it was announced, I think at the end of last year. I was super excited. It's been really hard to come by, and we finally got one in. And to me, and it came in right at the same time as the Waldorf Iridium keyboard edition with the polyphonic aftertouch. And I was excited because both of these are kind of my first real time I've had to expend with Waldorf instruments in depth. I don't have a lot of experience with their previous vintage stuff or their current lineup in the last 10 years or so, since they're in their third iteration. And I have to report that I'm really impressed and surprised and delighted by the instruments. They're a different palette. They're a different kind of coloring and sound than some of the other leading synth manufacturers from Korg, Roland, Yamaha, the big three, Behringer. These sound pretty different than a lot of the other synths that are out there. And the M is interesting because it goes all the way back to the PPG wave, which is also interesting because Waldorf is a company that rose out of the ashes of the PPG wave company. And this actually it rose out of the ashes twice, because there was the original Waldorf that took the PPG technology and created the Microwave 2, Microwave X2 XT, and the Waldorf Wave, which was their kind of like flagship attempt to take the PPG wave into the 90s. Also, arguably, which really put them in a bad spot. They spent a lot of money developing these things, and they just didn't get enough traction, from what I understand. And they, I think, went out of business in the early 2000s. But the M is both reimagination of the microwaves. It has modeling to model the Microwave 1 and the 2 to kind of give you different tonalities. It's also got a modern SSM filter designed by Rosen, who was the guy that originally designed the analog filter chip for the original PPG waves. And so it's kind of hearkening back to both eras of PPG and Waldorf wavetable hybrid synthesizers. And it really sounds fantastic. The analog filter gives it a very different flavor, and then the interface is fantastic to use, scrolling through wavetables and playing around with the different modulations, and it's got a analog VCA, so the panning sounds very different. It's a very hard, almost audible stereo sound, which I think you don't really see. You don't hear it that often in modern instruments. So when you hear the way the stereo panning, the way it sounds a lot. It's got a very nice kind of feel that you find in a lot of those instruments in the 80s and 70s. Oh, not 70s, the 80s really, that had analog VCA, stereo VCA. So very, very interesting tonally, its own thing. It can be a little harsh, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's definitely in your face in a lot of ways, and it definitely, I think a lot of wavetable synthesizers have that characteristic. It goes to really odd places, but they're really sonically exciting, and you can do a lot with them. They're not bread and butter kind of basic sounds. You can get some really interesting stuff that's going on in your patches. So let's take a listen, and we'll conclude with some final thoughts. So there you have it, the Waldorf M. It's got some fierce competition with the Third Wave releasing their own version of a PPG, which a lot of people are saying sounds really great. I think this sounds pretty awesome. I haven't had a chance to play the Third Wave's version, and I know Behringer is working on their own version of a recreation of the original PPGs. So I think the Waldorf M will hold its own. It's very well designed. It feels great. It's fun to play with, and the patches are pretty fantastic that are in this, just the factory patches. So I think it will stand the test of time. We'll see how it competes in the world of hybrid wavetable synthesizers. I'm also curious to see how big of an audience forms around wavetable synthesis, because historically it hasn't done terribly well. It's not one of those types of synthesis that caught on and kind of swept the general public and the general population that have been interested in synthesizers. It's generally been subtractive synthesis, FM synthesis. This was not one of the types of synthesis that ever really became super mainstream, except maybe among sound designers and hardcore synthesis. So curious to see with these new releases if it attracts the more general audience, and with the kind of second generation of, or third, I'm not even sure how many generations, with this current wave of people getting into synthesizing, if they're going to create an audience where there wasn't as big of one before. So would love to hear your thoughts. Have you played one yet? Are you disappointed? Are you excited? Do you enjoy it? How does it compare to, if you have experience with the microwave and all its various iterations, how does it compare? Would love to hear your thoughts. Please leave them below. If you didn't hit subscribe, I would appreciate it. And if you want to talk more, go to alamomusic.com. We'd love to talk to you there. Thanks for watching today, and until next time.